Oh, it was a hot day, and you came in and the cold air made your nipples hard, and you were probably thirsty. So you went and got a drink.
You know, if you're naked and you're covered in blood outside, it looks almost black.
The talcum powder on your legs, you had to do it. You had to take off your gloves.
You son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash the Tooth Fairy Graham.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, we'll cover one, and choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, I'm very excited. Tonight, one of our great listeners, Omar I, who also has a commission coming up soon for Blue Thunder, which will be a good one, made me very excited when he wanted us to commission a very different film, the 1986 thriller Manhunter.
Well, he wrote in and said, "My dear tastemakers of Shat, greetings and thank you for taking the time to review one of my all-time favorite childhood movies, Manhunter. Now, is this my favorite movie of the era? Maybe not, but I've commissioned this with you for two reasons. First, of all my 80s favorites, this movie was the most impactful in terms of shaping my tastes in movies, TV, music, and literature. Second, I felt that your otherwise excellent Silence of the Lambs review was marred by one unfortunate omission: no mention of the first ever Hannibal Lecktor movie. So my memories of this movie date back to 1988. I was 13 living in England, and my favorite show growing up was Miami Vice. The grittiness, the violence, wrapped in a hyper-stylized package of cutting-edge music, cinematography, and fashion. It was the absolute peak of cool to my young and impressionable mind. One episode stood out as my favorite, Shadow in the Dark. If you haven't seen it, check it out. The one episode of Miami Vice that I find terrifying even now. Crockett assists the robbery squad in tracking down a serial burglar who may be escalating to murder, and Crockett is almost driven insane by getting in this guy's mind. This episode left an impression and contributed to many a sleepless night. Weeks later, I'm browsing the local video store and I come across a box for a movie by the creator of Miami Vice. Interesting. About a tormented FBI investigator who gets in the mind of the serial killers he hunts. Okay, sold. The movie was Manhunter by the then little-known Michael Mann. I love Michael Mann. His movies, the themes, the look, the style, it's about as good as it gets. You like Heat? So much of what made Heat great can be found in Manhunter. The cinematography, the lighting, the character types, obsessive cops defined by whom they're hunting, the terse dialogue, the darkness, edginess of it all. Manhunter basically started my lifelong love affair with Mann's work. Look, I could go on forever about why I love this movie, but I am so excited to hear what you guys have to say about it. Misguided opinions about Blade Runner notwithstanding, you are my favorite film critics, and I know you will give this piece the attention it is due. Do I think it holds up? I honestly don't know. I'm too biased, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Also, on the off chance any of you haven't seen it, I'm thrilled to introduce to you. With my warmest regards, Omar.
Omar's letter is one of those that makes me very nervous to review a film because he referred to us as film critics. Oh. And Omar, you understand this movie better than I do. I guarantee it. I'm just a guy who watches movies and then talks about it with his friends.
See, I feel no pressure because he's like, hey, I'm too biased. Like, I appreciate that. I appreciate the recognition that, like, you don't know Omar. And so that leaves me a little bit off the hook.
Fuck no, you guys are. I thought you were terrified because Omar said this was his favorite movie as a kid growing up, that this shaped who he was, and that he found an episode of Miami Vice terrifying. Omar could be sitting in his house right now with a stocking over his nose and putting in a mouthpiece and drawing out like directions to our house. So that's why I'm a bit terrified.
Well, Omar, I hope you take it easy on us. Well, Manhunter is a 1986 thriller directed and written by Michael Mann, based on the 1981 novel Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. It stars William Petersen as FBI profiler Will Graham. Also featured are Tom Noonan as serial killer Francis Dollarhide, Dennis Farina as Graham's FBI superior Jack Crawford, and Brian Cox as the incarcerated killer Hannibal Lecter. The film focuses on Graham coming out of retirement to lend his talents to an investigation on Dollarhide, a killer known as the Tooth Fairy. In doing so, he must confront the demons of his past and meet with Lecter, who nearly killed Graham. It was the first film adaptation of Harris's Hannibal Lecktor novels, as well as the first adaptation of Red Dragon, which later became the basis for a film of the same name in 2002. Opening to mixed reviews, Manhunter fared poorly at the box office at the time of its release, making only $8.6 million in the United States. However, it has been reassessed in more recent reviews and now enjoys a more favorable reception, as both the acting and the stylized visuals have been appreciated better in later years. Its resurgent popularity, which may be due to the later adaptations of Harris's books and Petersen's success in CSI crime scene investigation, has seen Manhunter labeled as a cult film. So Big D, Ash, we always ask what your memories are and where you were the first time you saw this movie. Big D, we'll start with you. What are your memories of Manhunter?
So this came out on video when I was a customer service rep for my local Blockbuster Video in Larchmont, New York. It was the most popular and the highest revenue store in our district. Not bragging, but I was Employee of the Month for, I think, September of 1991, possibly. But I remember Silence of the Lambs coming out. It was huge. It had its own one section of the new release wall. The critics loved it. It won 5 of the 7 Academy Awards it was nominated for. The audience loved it. But all I remember was the super cool, like the early adopters, like the book readers who were like, oh, Silence of the Lambs? No, you got to see Manhunter. Have you seen Manhunter? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen Manhunter because we only had like 2 copies of it. And it was continuously out. So at that time, I wanted to watch it. It was impossible to get. So I didn't see it while I worked there. I saw it a couple years after, but it didn't have the same impact. And going back and rewatching it now, it almost felt like I hadn't watched it before.
I take a lot of shit for my review of Silence of the Lambs on this podcast. So much so that I went back and looked at my score and thought it was much lower. I gave it 1 wipe, that's a good movie. And as much as I enjoyed The Silence of the Lambs, I never got into the rest of the series, either film or TV. And I don't know why, because I really like Mads Mikkelsen. I like the subject matter. I really like this movie. And maybe I'll take a peek at some of the other adaptations after House of the Dragon and Rings of Power and Sandman and Andor all over. So this winter, maybe I'll get into the rest of the Hannibal Lecter series. Oh, and I got to rewatch The Sopranos too. So after all that, maybe I'll take a look.
Well, I've always loved Hannibal Lecter as a character. As I said on the Silence of the Lambs podcast, I personally believe the show Hannibal is the only iteration to actually get Will Graham and Hannibal correct. But I do love Anthony Hopkins as Lecter too. I like his performance. And I also really enjoyed Red Dragon, which in parts I had no idea was a direct ripoff, including script from this movie. But I had never seen this. So I thought I had. But then when I started it, I was like, nope. So I was kind of excited to watch it.
So Ash, if I were to get started after I watch House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, Sandman, and/or Sopranos, would you say to start with the TV show and not go straight to Red Dragon, the 2002 movie?
No, I would watch. Mads Mikkelsen and Hugh Dancy are phenomenal in Hannibal. I would watch it.
Got it.
It's also just a really beautifully dark show.
Well, Omar, I hope you make yourself a nice little gin and tonic, sit back on the couch, loosen up your stocking cap, and let's hit the trailer.
And please don't kill us. Don't come kill us. Regardless of my score, I like you, Omar. Please don't kill me.
Intruder entered through kitchen sliding door.
Nationwide victims.
Yeah, this is Will Graham of the FBI.
One
killer.
This is what the subject's teeth look like. Have you ever seen blood in the moonlight well?
Multiple trails.
Just you and me now, sport.
One hunter.
I'm gonna find you, damn it.
FBI agent Will Graham. Manhunter.
Will Graham is a former FBI criminal profiler who is retired following a mental breakdown after being attacked by the cannibalistic serial killer, Dr. Hannibal Lecktor, whom he captured. Graham is approached at his Florida home by his former FBI superior, Jack Crawford, who is seeking help with a new serial killer case. Promising his wife that he will do nothing more than examine evidence and not risk physical harm, Graham agrees to visit the most recent crime scene in Atlanta, where he tries to enter the mindset of the killer, dubbed the Tooth Fairy by the police, for the bite marks left on his victims.
So this was the first time I can actually remember in a film a crime profiler, somebody who's trying to catch the criminals by getting into their head. I'd never seen it before. Now it's popular. It's in like all the TV shows that Ash likes, like NCIS this, NCIS that, you know, all the TV shows with forensic science.
I'm sorry, all the TV shows that I like NCIS.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever watched an episode of NCIS in my life.
What about CSI? You like CSI?
Never watched CSI. I have watched Criminal Minds.
Do they have forensic science in that?
Well, they're behavior profilers.
Oh, okay, so there we go. So Ash is that.
Not NCIS. God.
So I had never experienced any of this on film before. Somebody who looks at the forensics, the clues, and they also try to break down the suspect. And I like the way that Will does it. He walks through the house. He's narrating what he sees, what he thinks. I like it. It seems like reasonable of what somebody would do in that profession. When he walks through the house, it's quiet, it's still, and he opens up the bedroom door, turns the light on. I audibly gasped. I was so at ease with the film to that point. The arterial spray everywhere, the blood pools on the floor. I just went, oh, it was I wondered what the hell had happened.
I mean, somebody died.
Violently.
I mean, look, here's the first time that I'm going to say it. Red Dragon did this better than Manhunter. There was a reticence in the 80s to show family violence, especially like children being harmed. I don't know if anybody remembers the Macaulay Culkin little kid from Jurassic Park film where he's abused and like it was a huge deal. It was like Red Wagon or some shit like that. Like it was a huge deal that they were showing like that kids were hurt. And so they didn't really do that. It was a simpler time. But I do think the true violence of what's happened is like needed in this movie. We get the horror of that initial reveal, but we only see that one room, and like the carnage in the book, in the show Hannibal, in, you know, the movie Red Dragon, it's not just that room. Like what Francis Dolarhyde did was horrendous to these families. And in this movie, we never get to see truly how awful it was. And I don't know, like, I think it neuters in some way the horror that is Francis Dolarhyde that I found a little bit of a bummer.
I'm with Ash on this one. This movie does not start strong. I was really worried. The opening murder scene with the droning synth, which Omar rightly predicted I would love. We get like the shaky camera work. It's just very 80s crime drama. It's very Miami Vice. And then suddenly we're taken, just like Miami Vice, to a beach scene where you've got Jack Crawford and Will Graham, and we're introduced to these two characters, and they're talking to each other like men do, like cops do. And everything about this interaction feels like a cliche. You got the cop who wants out, but the boss needs him back for one more job. And they're reciting these lines like robots, and the whole thing looks like a Glenn Frey music video. But then we get a little surprise that I did appreciate where, you know, Will is handed these photos and you're expecting to see like some gruesome crime scene, and he doesn't want to look at them. And he hesitates, but then he does look at it, and it's a family. It's not a murder scene. You realize that it's just the act of looking at it, he's opening that door to going back into that world. I thought that was a smart move, but everything before that, trash.
No, but listen, this is a junction in the film. It can go one of two ways. It can go the way that I was thankfully it did. It went the minimal dialogue. You know, we get hints that something has happened. Will's been traumatized, but we never get it outright explained in the beginning. There's no details. We see that he's popping pills on the job, so you know he's screwed up. Molly comes by and Jack says, hey, what's up? She just blows him off and walks by. So you know there's some tension. There's something going on. And I would take this any day over the fugitive type flashback where when he goes, I can't come back to the job. And we see flashbacks in black and white of him going up the stairs to his wife, just like here. And you know, you see the crime scene. I don't want to see that. I would have rather have a little mystery throughout the film.
I mean, I don't know if it's mystery. I mean, like the metaphor of like the fucking sea turtles is like pretty heavy from the beginning. Like there's no mystery as to like who Will Graham is in this movie. And here's the deal. Minimal dialogue is fine. I have no problem with that. But this is forced minimal dialogue. They are like acting 101 here. And the star of this movie who plays Will Graham, he will always be the dad from Fear for me, which I'm really excited we're going to be covering soon. And I think he's awesome. I don't think there's anything wrong with him as an actor, but it was rough to get through those first like 15 minutes, let's say, and then some stuff started to click into place. And I think part of what caused that is that I know it's the 80s. But one thing about this movie is the color scheme that they go with. So my husband, Tom, he walked in while I was watching it. And it's that scene in the bedroom before Will leaves home. And so Tom stopped and he went, why is the whole world blue in this movie? Like he had no clue as to why. Because like, y'all, if you've not seen it, it is so blue. Like the sheets are blue and their bodies are blue and they look like the Smurfs. Yeah. And it looked like, honestly, it was shot with one of those Instagram filters that allows you to cast in like neon blue, green, yellow, or pink. And I get that this was high art in the 80s, but it was so silly looking at it today.
For those who don't know, Michael Mann is notorious for his color code. It's consistent throughout his movies. Like white and gray are mainstream life. Red is like danger and malevolence, like you see in the Tooth Fairy's home. Blue is love and the essence of the character, like you see in the intimate scenes between Molly and Will. But you're right, Ash. We understand the art. We get it. But Michael Mann went a little hard on this one, like to the point of verging on tacky.
I mean, I understand our job here as podcasters is to look back and say, does it hold up? And the art has elevated since then. But I came across a fact in doing research for this that blew my mind and put something in perspective. This was a different time for everything in the world. Filmmaking, just anything. The police, the relationship, abuse for kids, like Ash was saying. Will Petersen, in an interview, said the scene where he falls asleep, he's looking at the crime scene photos on a plane with a child next to him, made me feel like I was watching Game of Thrones coming back from Boston and trying to shield it. And the kids screaming and, you know, it disrupts the plane. That shit was real. They shot this guerrilla style. They brought the crew onto a United Airlines flight from Chicago to Florida. They bought regular coach tickets in the middle of the flight, broke out their cameras, filmed the scene. The flight attendants were pissed off. The crew was pissed. And what they did was they gave out like the jackets from the Miami Vice, the crew. So that kind of put everybody at ease. But this is security. This is flights. This is the world pre 9/11. Anything went. And I think I'm still going to forgive the lighting and the stylized over the top because it was the time.
And Michael Mann was a wild man on this film. The shot that caught my eye is when Will Graham is like running down the stairs after talking with Hannibal Lecter and he's having like a panic attack. He's like running from right to left and then left to right. And the camera's like far away, but it zooms in for a tight shot while he's running horizontally across these floors. And it's like having trouble tracking him. And I'm like, dude, this means something. But I am too dumb to get it. I felt like I was a dog looking at a clock. Like, huh?
Dude, you could see him run so far off, he almost goes off screen. And you're,
well, and also, what kind of fucking mental hospital is this that has that type of like stairway leading up to it? Like it looked like a hotel that they just happened to be keeping Lecter in.
It reminded me of the Smithsonian. Like that's what
or the Guggenheim. That's what Guggenheim, I thought. It was like the fucking Guggenheim.
Here's one other thing to keep in mind. I watched the theatrical version on iTunes. I assume you guys watched the same?
Correct.
Yes.
That is not the real theatrical version. The theatrical version they put out in the theaters, they lost the work print. So when it came time to put this onto the HBOs, the Showtimes, man went back and reworked a close to finished version of the film. So what we watched here is a different version of what was in the theater. The one that we watch is missing some audio, some sound effects, some stuff. So I'm going to think that him running comically through those stairs and that stairwell was something that maybe in the original version was done a little better.
Michael Mann gets finished and he realizes it's 2 minutes shorter than the original movie. He's like, fuck, what are we going to do? Hey, we still got that footage of William Petersen running around. Roll it. Having found the killer's fingerprints, Graham meets with Crawford and they're accosted by tabloid journalist Freddie Lowndes. Graham pays a visit to Lecter and asks for his insight. Lecter agrees to look at the case file and obtains Graham's home address while faking a phone call to his attorney. Graham travels to the first crime scene in Alabama, and Frederick Chilton, Lecter's warden, finds a note from the Tooth Fairy in Lecter's personal effects. Crawford brings Graham to the FBI Academy, where a missing section of the note reveals what Lecter removed. They discover an instruction to communicate through the personal section of the National Tattler.
So I have questions. Lecter is an absolutely insane person. Like, he is one of the most notorious killers. He escaped authorities for years. He's manipulative. He's cruel. And worst of all, he's bored. Why would you leave him crime scene photos? And it feels like a plot device because it would never happen. It would never be allowed to happen because these photographs that he has here that poor little girl saw on the plane, like, this is criminal porn. And if I'm the remaining family and I find out that Lecter has these photos of my family members like brutally slaughtered, I'm pissed.
But I understood it because it was almost a bribery. Hey, I'm going to give this to you. I'm going to feed your ego. I like the way that he deals with Lecter as opposed to Clarice, who obviously Lecter feels superior. Here, it felt more of an even fight. But we can just thankfully, we know that Lecter's dangerous. Obviously, the police have learned something after this where they almost kill Will Graham's family, right? They're going to get some security protocol. They're going to make sure there's no way that Lecter could access files or maybe a ballpoint pen. They have to have solved this, right?
See, but this is the problem with them not fleshing out these characters, is because it isn't that type of relationship. Like, Will and Lecter are like really good friends before he tries to kill him. Like, before Will figures out that Lecter is who he is, like, they know one another well. Like, they have drinks together and have dinners together. And, like, there is a friendship there. And there's this tension that exists between them because it's like, I'm really good friends with you and I liked you a lot, but you're a fucking murderer. So what does that say about me? And I still want to be your friend, right? And they don't explore that at all in this relationship between these two characters. And forget the movies that came after it. Just look at like the book source material. Like, nothing from that part of Thomas Harris's like text do they have in here. And that's what I think you're feeling. That's why I think it feels like a plot device, is because Will Graham knows that Lecter is going to get off on these pictures. He would have never left them with him.
If I can ask, because it seemed petty to me that Lecter would want him killed, because they seemed like they had a working relationship and a respect. In the books, does he want to have Will's family killed?
He wants to punish him because he's psychotic. Like, he's not able, he's a sociopath. He's not able to, well, he's not a psychopath. He's a sociopath. He's not able to actually have relationships. And that's part of what the show Hannibal explores, is whether or not sociopaths can actually have friends. That's like the big question Hannibal asks himself.
The guy who understands Hannibal the best in this movie is the security guard.
Yes.
It's like, if you turn around, I will mace you in the face.
Right.
He drops off the phone and leaves. I'm like, that guy's brilliant. And we should touch on the casting for Hannibal Lecter, because everyone, when they think Hannibal Lecter, they think of Sir Anthony Hopkins. Brian Cox is a great actor, and he plays Hannibal Lecter in this film. I've known him best from Braveheart. He's creepy, but he's not as creepy as Anthony Hopkins, like not even close. And for me, this Hannibal felt like a little too foofy in his approach. Like, I expected him to just be like sipping tea in his cozy socks and doing nothing more. Still, I enjoyed that first scene between Lecter and Graham, and I couldn't help but think how differently this movie approached that cop-convict relationship from any other police movies from the mid-'80s. Like, it was a very different take on the back and forth.
This is a dude who is so fucking classy that the reason he turns to cannibalism is because he's tired of tasting bland food, and he makes these beautiful dishes out of the people he kills. He knows what to pair with dinner. He knows whiskeys. He knows drinks. He knows society. Like, he is the creme de la creme, and that's why it's so scary that he is what he is. And so he's got to seem sleek, and he's almost got to seem like overtly condescending. And Hopkins does that perfectly. He rides that line between class and insanity. And Mads Mikkelsen, you're like attracted to Hannibal in that show because he's so damn sexy. I didn't get any of that from Brian Cox. Like, I think Cox is an incredible actor. I really do. And I do think it's an unfair judgment because I think it's really hard to go back and look in the 80s and be like, okay, well, Anthony Hopkins and Mads Mikkelsen did it better. But this movie made a choice. And so let's judge it on that choice. It had a source material, and it still made a choice to go for that typical criminal portrayal and not like the psychological ramifications of Lecter and the games he plays. And that's okay, but this isn't Hannibal Lecter to me. This is just like a random criminal. It doesn't feel like Hannibal Lecter. So, he winds up just being kind of there. And in my opinion, Logan Roy, who Brian Cox plays on Succession, is so much scarier than his version of Hannibal is.
The other big casting choice they made was William Petersen playing Will Graham. And he's doing his best as the lead in this movie. I mean, he's really trying. The guy's putting in work. But I think it's evidence of just how much more charming and fleshed out Jodie Foster was as Clarice Starling. And you pointed that out, Big D. Most of Will Graham's dramatic moments in this movie involve yelling angrily at nobody. He's yelling at mirrors. He's yelling at windows. He's just yelling at the ether. And I understand it's showing him tapping into his rage and his murderous core. But I couldn't stop laughing because it just felt like when William Shatner yells out Khan. He's just, who are you talking to?
I was into it at first. I was thinking, okay, this is cool. We're going to be able to see what his process is. But I agree, G, 100%. It goes from that to progressively longer interactions with this imaginary killer in his head. And I finally had to chuckle when he defiantly yells, "It's just me and you now, sport." I'm like, okay, let's tone it down a little bit here, Will.
Yeah, I mean, even Edward Norton in Red Dragon doesn't do this well. They don't capture this inner monologue because that shit only works in a play. Where somebody's giving a soliloquy or a monologue on stage and we know that we have to hear inside their head because we're not telepathic, right? And it is a little silly. But again, Hugh Dancy, he does this really well in the show because you understand he doesn't just have a gift to put himself in the killer's shoes, I guess, as Big D says in NCIS and CSI, they do. It isn't like that. He can actually physically see what they're doing, and he closes his eyes and he becomes the killer. He can walk through, he can feel their feelings. It's like he's got a sixth sense about it, and it's fucked up. And here, this dude, he just looks angry. You just can't see the burden he carries from the gift, other than that scene in the movie where man has it half the TV and half his face. Yeah. And he's like, you had to touch her, didn't you? You just had to. Yeah. You had to feel her. And I'm like, what is happening?
Oh, it was a hot day, and you came in the cold air made your nipples hard, and you were probably thirsty. So
if you're naked and you're covered in blood outside, it looks almost black.
The talcum powder on your legs, you had to do it. You had to take off your gloves.
You son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch. Yes, that part.
Damn you.
That part is ridiculous. But I think one thing they do well is I felt that Will reflected the stress of the job, that you don't get to compartmentalize your life. You can't see this horrible shit every day and just put it aside. And I have firsthand experience with this. My sister worked with abused kids in Boston. And I saw what it did to her, because the things she would hear, no one should know the horrible things that happen and the horrible things that people are put through. And you carry that kind of trauma home with you. And I think Will, as fucked up as he is and as comical as his method is occasionally, you can see some things going on. You can see the stress within the family. You can see how fucked up his kid's probably going to be. And I think they did a good job of showing the trauma of the job following him home.
You're a much more mature film critic than I am, because I'm forever tainted by It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And every time William Petersen had a serious scene, I just kept thinking of Will Graham being played by a stressed out Charlie Day. And that's all I could think about. Just, smoking the cigarette, being all fucking stressed out, having panics. It's a different kind of movie when you see it that way.
It'd be a great fucking episode, though.
The gang tracks a serial killer.
Mm-hmm. The gang meets Lecter.
Lacking the proper code book to plant a fake advertisement to replace Lecter's, the FBI let the advertisement run as is. Graham organizes an interview with Lowndes, giving a false and derogatory profile of the Tooth Fairy to incite him. After a sting operation fails to catch the killer, the Tooth Fairy kidnaps Lowndes, sets him on fire, and rolls him into the parking garage of the National Tattler. The FBI decodes Lecter's coded message to the Tooth Fairy. It's Graham's home address with an instruction to kill Graham and his family. After the FBI moves Graham's family to a safe house, he explains to his son Kevin why he retired previously.
Now, there are some characters that if you're a fan of this kind of world, we've not talked about. And it's because they're not really super developed in this movie the way that they are in other versions of it. And I think that some of these characters are actually really fun. Crawford, I think in this movie is a little one-dimensional. I also think it's the same in Silence of the Lambs. I think he's more one-dimensional in that film. Chilton is pretty much nothing in this movie, and he's such a great character. And I do kind of miss them, but I want to say something positive, which is that it was kind of refreshing to focus on just Will and the Tooth Fairy. And Hannibal was kind of an afterthought, but like Will and the Tooth Fairy, and not muddy it all up. But I have to say, out of all of them, I just wish we'd had a little bit of Chilton, because Chilton is the funniest guy, and this desire to be something that he'll never be, which is important. I think he's hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that Chilton was in this movie until you brought it up. But I really liked Crawford. I thought Crawford was a fun character. Dennis Farina he's just a fun dude. Like if Chicago was a person, it would be Dennis Farina. R.I.P. Oh, and we keep comparing Manhunter to The Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon. Manhunter has a strength that I feel was Silence of the Lambs' weakness. And it's a weakness that I brought up during our review. Manhunter plays on direct fundamental clues and evidence, whereas Silence of the Lambs was more like a Scooby-Doo caper, right? Yeah, Will is doing some mystical mind game stuff, but it isn't like bugs and throats and alphabet games. I really like the forensic jargon they were using when they were kind of going through at the FBI, all the evidence that they had and sorting through stuff. They're discussing the napkin letter from Avid Fan. Did you guys notice that Chris Elliott popped up in that scene?
Of course,
what are you doing here?
Yeah, it was very strange. But Gene, I think you're being far too kind. The detective work in this film comes down to Will role-playing his inner serial killer, and he is Detective Rain Man, let's call him. Every breakthrough that they have comes from his innate superpower to decipher what the killer's intent was. There's no, this blood drop led us to the backyard, to the bloody glove, to the front of OJ's house. There was no chain of evidence. It came down to the videotape, which the police set up in his hotel room. He sat and watched it and goes, oh, wow, they didn't take any souvenir. It's got to be somebody who's working on the film. Let's find out who it was. Peel the sticker. There was no incremental discovery. It was just Will being able to channel his inner serial killer to see everything at one time.
It was step by step. It was clear as day. Serial killers take trophies. This guy doesn't. So how does he relive the feeling of the killings, which they all do? It's a trait they share, perhaps with photos or videos. So where should you go? Watch film that you have of the families to get into the killer's head. That's what this guy does, right? Watching the film, he starts to understand that the killer knew things about the families that appeared on film. It's the only way he would know that. Trace the film to the lab. I don't understand where the leap of logic is.
Well, yeah, and I loved the entire scene on the plane when they've got the guys on the ground and they're sending them like all of the driver's licenses because they're going through and trying to track down who Dollarhide is. Like, I actually felt like they solved this crime because while I love Silence of the Lambs, I am not ever going to not like that film. You know, when they're doing the autopsy and then it's like, wait, she has something in her throat. And then she goes to like the mystery men, like in the X-Files, and they tell her that it's, you know, a deadhead moth or whatever the fuck it's called, you know, that they, you know, figure it out. It's a
Just
bit.
really likes Jerry Garcia.
What I mean, it's a leap of logic, is that there's 10 times more reasonable explanations for what trophy he took. Maybe he took pictures. Maybe he took videos. Maybe he knew the family. There's all these avenues that they could have investigated, but they go straight to a company that converts old celluloid film to VHS in another state as the most logical first step is a joke.
2 points, sir. First point. How are you going to investigate if he took pictures or not? You're going to be like, has anyone bought film within 30 miles of the home? Like,
They don't even
stupid.
discuss it.
Stupid.
Discuss it.
Because it's stupid. Second point. Second point. Like, in this time period, there weren't a lot of companies that did that. There weren't a lot of companies that had VHS. And I was actually very surprised because in Red Dragon, like, we knew it was this video compilation thing because, you know, it was in the 2000s. But back then I thought it was going to be like a photo processing. If you found out that it was like he actually saw these things in movement, like there wouldn't have been a lot of companies that did that in the 1980s. And so I think they went through a very short list and they figured it out. And they also could have gone through their financials too. It's like, have they paid any of these companies? They find out they paid, you know, I don't know, Shat Video. And then they find out that, you know, okay, Shat Video is in St. Louis. So let's look and see if there's any tall, blonde, cleft lip dudes at Shat Video.
Well, maybe it is possible because we do see that the Atlanta police suck. The movie makes that clear that they suck ass. They can't even get the fingerprints right. They come in, when they have that reveal that they found the fingerprints, they do the mic drop and walk out because they're kind of laughing at
They
Will.
found a fingerprint on their eyeball.
And a toenail.
And a toenail.
Yeah, the Atlanta cops don't seem to be too proficient.
He had to touch her feet.
You had to, you son of a bitch.
Oh, that's talcum powder.
God damn you.
It's me and you, pal.
You had to take that glove off.
Oh, yeah, it's me and you. But I got to go back to the family here for a minute. I got to go back. I got to take us off the crime scene, this ridiculous detective work. I think we're glossing over here one of the true victims of this film. It's Molly. I feel bad for her. I feel bad for the family. I think we know that the marriage is hanging on by a string. It is completely obvious. But there is some underlying tension and some sense of abuse to where Molly doesn't speak her mind. She's standoffish. She's only there to bask in the blue light and roll around in the sheets when Will looks a little bit horny. I feel bad for her. So she's smart and she gets it when she says, you've already made your decision. Don't come to me and pretend like you're asking whether I can go back. So I know she's not an equal party in this relationship. And then we get the scene where you've survived now Lecter's attack before Will. He's gutted you. You were in the hospital. You almost died. So now you know that Lecter's put a hit out on your family. He's given out the address. And what's the first thing you do when you're going to set up the new serial killer to try to catch him in a sting? Let's bring the wife to me, and then we'll just we'll roll around the sheets, blue lights. How are you not thinking that this is a big mistake? I wholeheartedly expected, and maybe it was because of Silence of the Lamb twist, with the police knocking on the doors, that we see that Clarice is actually in front of the right house. Here, I expected when they jump and spring into action to get that poor jogger, have a little patience, guys. You don't know that this guy, there's somebody running at me in a jogging suit. What could he be doing? He could be jogging. I expected the camera to cut back to the hotel, and we would have seen Dollarhide there paying a visit to his wife. That's totally what I was expecting.
Big D, we've talked about it before on the pod, but just to reiterate, people don't really change. And I think Molly knew what Will was when she fell in love with him. And I think Manhunter does an excellent job showing that she loves him enough to let him do what he needs to do. I don't think that makes them unequal partners. I think it's just she's found this thing that she loves, and he has to be that way for her to love him. I was just on a soccer road trip, and there were two buses. There was the party bus, and there was the quiet bus. And so I look around the party bus, and I realized one of our dudes wasn't there. And I'm like, oh shit, like Gavin's not here. And I messaged him, and he's like, oh, I'm on the quiet bus. I'm like, dude, why aren't you on the party bus? And he said, this is verbatim, the girlfriend wants to be on the calm bus. You know how it is, LOL. No, I don't know how it is, LOL. Like, if she loves you, you will come on the party bus because you were a party guy. I believe that you got to let people be what they are. And Molly does, because she's a badass.
At least give her a shotgun. What cop's wife does not have a firearm?
I agree with that part. When she told the kids to like get back in the room or whatever, I'm like, okay, she's going to get the gun now, or at least like a baseball bat or something. No, she just opened the door and that fucking walrus man came forward. Like, I think you should get inside, ma'am.
Yeah. Will, what's going on? Why are the police here? Go to Montana. Just go to Montana.
That was a good suggestion.
Yeah, how about you do that first before you bring her to the hotel in the area that you're trying to trap the new serial killer? I think he's looking for a replacement, a new mommy.
Oh, God.
At his job in a St. Louis film lab, Frances Dollarhide, the Tooth Fairy, approaches a blind coworker, Reba McLean, and offers her a ride home. They go to Dollarhide's home, where Reba is oblivious to the fact that Dollarhide is watching home movie footage of his planned next victims. She kisses him, and they have sex. The following night, Graham realizes the Tooth Fairy's murders are driven by a desire for acceptance. Meanwhile, Dollarhide watches as Reba is escorted home by another coworker. He murders the man and abducts Reba. One of my most frequent complaints about films that we watch is movie makers laying out the facts instead of letting actors play the scene out. And I think the newer the movie, the more it happens. It's something that separates movies from books. When Manhunter wants to tell us that Dollarhide understands people in a different way, it takes us to Reba listening to the heartbeat of a sedated tiger. Like something, it's both surreal and entirely possible and tells us so much. When Manhunter wants to tell us where Will is mentally, it takes us to something seemingly unrelated, which is a grocery store where he has a conversation with his son, and we can all understand, and it feels totally real while they're surrounded by an abundance of products on shelves. We're getting so much information that's unsaid along with what's being said.
This was the best stock supermarket I'd ever seen. I could picture the manager telling the night crew, listen, they're filming a big film here tomorrow. I want the store to look tip-top. Every shelf is filled. There's not a single item that's been sold in this entire store. But Ash, I got to go to you for some answers here. Dollarhide, he's off in the corner. He seems to be doing a nice thing. He's taken Reba to this sedated tiger. She's feeling the tiger. She's like listening to its breath. The camera pans over and we see Dollarhide in the back corner. He looked to me like he may have been pleasuring himself or he had climaxed during this experience. Is there anything to that?
He's excited because she can handle a predator. She can handle an apex predator, which he sees himself as. So if she can love on the tiger, she can love on the dragon. That's what you're seeing, is that satisfaction to know that she's not afraid. And I agree with you, Gene. Like, I think this is where this movie outperforms Red Dragon. I adore Ralph Fiennes. I think he's a wonderful actor. And I thought his portrayal of Frances Dollarhide was good. But the reveal of like the full body back tattoo where poor Philip Seymour Hoffman is just like ad-libbing, oh no, don't show me. Like, that was weird. And then when he goes and eats the painting, like, also weird, right? We have neither of those scenes in this film. And because of that, in Red Dragon, it feels like a movie that's like spliced together on a storyboard. And it's a fun movie, but it feels like a movie. This one lets the narrative breathe a little bit. And because of that, in the middle, this is a great film.
And it makes him scarier. The Tooth Fairy is fantastically scary. He's not as fun as Buffalo Bill, but both of them play this fascinating dichotomy of being powerful in their own worlds, but they're also utterly unimpressive from an objective standpoint. And Manhunter plays on that so smart. When you see the Tooth Fairy with his pathetic stocking mask and like that goofy like Steinmart silk shirt, you're like, he's just a fucking goofball. Like, he is an insecure loser that has to kill to feel anything and feel himself becoming that dragon, right? And when the movie introduced Reba, it just took it to another level. It transcended into the realm of great filmmaking, as far as I'm concerned. When he's surprised by her blindness, and then that helps him engage with her as his true vulnerable self, you realize, holy shit, that mask, it wasn't to hide his identity. It was to hide his shame. He was going to kill Freddie Lounds anyway. The stocking on his face wasn't meant to hide his identity. It was about hiding his shame. And this section of the movie, this middle, as Ash says, it's a mini story that tells us so much, but it blends seamlessly with the rest of the movie. It doesn't feel like a distraction. And Dollarhide goes from don't look at me to don't touch my face to actually placing Reba's hand on his scar and crying while she's asleep. It's fucking beautiful.
The way I gauge whether a character can play a true monster is how I'm uneasy at all times in a situation that should be safe. She's at work. She's not going to get killed. I'm like, no, don't let him drive you home. Don't get in the car. Don't leave the dark room. He never made me feel comfortable. At any point, he could snap. He could do something horrible. And I think the performance is amazing, Gene. You said that love-making scene. It's quiet. He's laying there in bed, and I felt you could see he wants to be normal. He feels the shame. He wants to be happy. He sees this woman who can tolerate, now, Ash, as you've enlightened me, that an apex predator. And he puts his hand on his mouth and he starts to cry and he's vulnerable. And he knows that he can never live this life.
Yeah, I think the movie really starts to shine here in a way that it doesn't elsewhere, because we get a story that isn't based on a crime. We get just kind of this rumination about this guy, which is what makes the Lecter stuff so interesting in Silence of the Lambs, right? Or in Hannibal, is because we're focusing on him and not his crimes. And there was this real suspense because it isn't that we're looking at the crimes of a monster. We're looking at someone knowing that he can be turned into one. And so that waiting for that switch to flip is really scary. And Joan Allen is great alongside him. She does such a good job in this movie. And I love that, like, her confidence surprises him in a way, like it disarms him. And their scenes together have so much tension.
Yeah, she's absolutely fearless. And that's just what he needs, right? And I feel like there were moments in the movie where, like, maybe it'll work. You're thinking, like, maybe it'll work out. Maybe she'll change him. We can just call this whole thing off, you know? Hey, he's not so bad. And then he's bad.
He's very bad.
It's Gene. It's because you said we are who we are. We don't change.
That's right. You got to just
go with the flow.
Let's go with the flow.
Be the Tooth Fairy.
Be the Tooth Fairy. Searching for a connection between the murdered families, Graham realizes that the killer must have seen their home movies. Graham and Crawford identify the lab in St. Louis where the films were processed. After determining which employees have seen these films, he and Crawford travel with the police escort to Dollarhide's home. Inside, Dollarhide prepares to kill Reba with a piece of glass. Seeing that Dollarhide has someone with him, Graham lunges through a window. He is subdued by Dollarhide, who retrieves a shotgun and shoots 2 police officers. Wounded in the firefight, Dollarhide returns to the kitchen where he is shot and killed by Graham. Graham, Reba, and Crawford are tended to by paramedics, and Graham returns home to his family.
So for me, at this point in the film, it takes a hard turn to the comical. I mean, we've seen that he's a decent profiler. He can channel his inner killer. He can understand the crime scene, but he is a god-awful as an officer in the field. His tactics, while they approach the house, it's comical, it's potentially illegal, and it's definitely dangerous. He rushes. They're like, hey, Will, we got to hold down. Let's get together. Let's regroup. There could be a victim. He just fucking hightails it, commandeers the car, tells the officers we're going there. Lights and sirens ablazing. You know, we don't want to go in quiet and maybe save a victim. He's stumbling around the woods to the point where I'm convinced he's going to get a rope around the neck because the Tooth Fairy's up in a tree.
It's the Phantom of the Opera.
No, the Tooth Fairy.
The level of your eye.
The Tooth Fairy's got a rope up in a tree. I'm thinking he's up there. He's gonna lasso him up. Something's gonna happen.
What fucking movie were you watching?
What are you talking about?
I mean, yeah. Are we talking comical or cartoonish?
Well, either way,
Dark City.
No, here's where it gets crazy. So he sees the house. He doesn't know that this is the correct house. He sees in the window some people struggling. It's him. It's him. This could be some other house where they're just wrestling, they're playing around. He runs full speed, okay, and does like a flying jump through a multi-pane glass window. He comes flying through. It reminded me, I know Gene or Ash, you weren't on the Gleaming the Cube episode, but there's a part there where Christian Slater is going to save his dead brother's girlfriend. He gets on his skateboard, he jumps the pool, and he flies through a similar window to disarm Colonel Track. This was so comically bad. It was awful in a movie that's supposed to be very grounded and very scary and very surreal.
I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that Graham looks through the window and clearly sees Dollarhide straddling Reba while he's holding a shard of broken glass. Like, I don't think they're playing around in there. And I'm screaming, shoot him!
Yes, shoot him!
Bullets go through windows. It's crazy. And the only explanation I can give for him jumping through the window after like 2 minutes of waiting, by the way, he's just like walking through the woods for some reason, is that Will was trying to prove to himself that he gets no joy from killing, right? He's trying to like solve this without killing anybody. But you can tell from those monster Glazer safety slugs that he was jamming into his 44, he was all about blowing the Tooth Fairy away. He knew he was going to do it before he even stepped in that house.
I can't believe that neither one of you have talked about the ridiculousness of turning off all the lights and then the car just falls in the ditch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, that one was like...
He's
what?
hurt pretty bad.
It looked like Smokey and the Bandit.
mean,
it looked
it
like
was
half of the
ridiculous.
cruisers ended up in the ditch.
But I have to say, I liked this death scene for Francis. Will shoots him. He kind of like flies up. And then if you look close at the way that the blood is pooling around him, like it's perfectly reminiscent of the dragon wings in the painting that we see earlier. And I love that he quote unquote became in death. And it's this homage to the author who kind of glorifies these killers, because you can't say that Thomas Harris doesn't glorify Lecter or he doesn't glorify who's in his text. And like Lecter, like Buffalo Bill, Dollarhide kind of wins because of the way that he goes out.
The editing on that shooting part was a little weird. I felt like he got shot like the same way from like 5 different angles. It was cut and spliced, kind of bizarre, but there is an artistry to it. And the parallels between Manhunter's build up to the finale and Silence of the Lambs build up to the finale, they were striking and very smart. You had that rushed flight, wandering blind, whether it's in the darkness or the person is blind, sexual issues, the killer's vanity being fulfilled in his death. The movies are so different, but they share that DNA, and it really came out in this final scene. Well, now is the time when we give our Shat score for Manhunter. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get a perspective. But 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is petting a sedated tiger and getting to play with the insides of its lips. That's my favorite part of a dog. It's got to be fucking amazing on a tiger. 5 wipes is an absolute disaster movie. It is having your lips bitten off, being set on fire, and then rolled into a parking garage on a wheelchair, only to die without reporting the story. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Manhunter?
R.I.P. Freddie Lowndes. I thought this was a fine movie. If I compare it to what comes after, it would be 3.5 wipes. But that's not fair. I don't think that's a fair thing to do. I think it has to be judged on its own. And so what is it? Well, it's a cop movie with a complex villain. And more so than that, it's a good cop movie with a good complex villain. So that makes it a little better than average for me. So it's going to be 2 wipes.
Manhunter had so much more substance and so much less flash than The Silence of the Lambs. We really got into the why of the killing instead of a, as I said, Scooby-Doo caper. But overall, it's not as polished as The Silence of the Lambs. I think everybody would agree on that, especially in the music department. It's something we haven't talked about. This movie might hold the world record for the most inappropriate song choices for important scenes. Every time something huge was happening, they'd have some goofy fucking rock song on. I was like, why? So that's 1.5 wipes for me.
But if I'm correct, the goofy songs only started in like the 3rd act.
Yeah.
The first 2/3 of the movie, I felt like I was watching Blade Runner. It was like,
yeah,
whoa, 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 whoa. And I was dozing off. Very similar. At the end, we get those crazy ass songs. But for me, I think I'm going to go with Gene. I've fluctuated. I was going to go 1.25, then 1.75. I think 1.5 is in the middle. I think the movie is a bit rougher. It's a bit low budget. But at this point, we've already established there was no film like this. The profiler wasn't a big topic in popular culture. Now we have NCIS. We have CIS every single fucking place. We got Criminal Intent, all these shows. People now, everyone understands the job they do. So for that, I mean, I thought it was enjoyable. The stylized shots, I like, man. I accepted them. Would I watch it again? I don't know, but I thought it has cinematic value. So for that, I'm going to go 1.5 wipe with Eugene.
So were all those snobby people at Blockbuster right?
Oh, fuck no. Silence of the Lambs is a much better film. No, fuck those people. Oh, you got to see the original. That's the good one.
Well, 1.5 wipes from Big D, 1.5 wipes from me, and 2 wipes from Ash gives us an average wipe score of 1.6 repeating wipes for Manhunter.
So Gene with a score of 1.666. Oh, 666. That now ties this in the 102 spot with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, War Games, The Rock, Back to the Future Part 3, Dutch, Stargate, Gremlins, and The Natural.
Yeah, that feels right.
I think in the hundreds. It's in the top 1/3 of our films.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Omar, you can put the knife down.
Oh, he's probably outside our windows right now, or my window. Right now, the mystery, the audience is wondering, who is Omar stalking? And
He's
it's
not
probably
stalking anybody because he's a totally normal dude. We love you, Omar.
My youth was shaped by watching Manhunter
You son of a bitch.
and Miami Vice.
All right. Thanks, Omar, for the commission. Big D, we got a little bit of time left. Let's get to some voicemails.
Gene, first up is our good friend and commissioner of RAD, Frank Falls.
Right now. Yeah, 6 months till RAD. I commissioned that mother a year ago. Me and Lori Laughlin on our bikes, about to do some slow dancing. RAD, 6 months away. Yeah, I've been waiting a long time. Air guitar on my bike with Lori Laughlin. Yeah, send me an angel. Lori Laughlin on my bike, 6 months to RAD. Woo, send me an angel. Bet you never seen any slow dancing on a bike. On a BMX, RAD's got it all. Right now, yeah. Hip gyration, right now. Woo, yeah. Ooh, ooh, man, 6 months till RAD. Woo! I'll talk to y'all in 3 months.
Have you guys ever seen those Larry Enticer videos? The guy with the snowmobile is like, just going to send it.
No.
I imagine Frank Falls looks exactly like him. That's my guess.
Man, thank you very much, Frank. You're making me want to try to schedule a double feature with BMX Bandits, because RAD and BMX Bandits as a back-to-back, that might be BMX heaven.
It's like Silence of the Lambs and Manhunter.
Very, very true. So thank you very much for the call. Next up, we have one from one of our great listeners, Paul.
Hey, Shot Heads, this is Paul from Gainesville. Love hearing my email read over the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai podcast. I want to let you know that when I started, you guys were on, I think, Event Horizon. And since then, I have listened to almost 300 movie podcasts, almost 4 to 5 a day because I DoorDash for a living. And yeah, you guys have been on my DoorDashes. I just want to make a few suggestions out there. First of all, I'm a broke bitch, so I can't commission anything. So if any of the fellow commissioners are listening, Hot Sauce Steve, you guys have done just about every damn near John Hughes movie imagine. And to celebrate that fact, I think y'all should do a special podcast where you do Not Another Teen Movie, because you have talked about doing a movie in the 2000s, which is 2002, so it would be 3 years past 99. And I think it would just be great for y'all to watch that movie and shat all over it. Hell, there's even a massive shat scene in the movie. It's just like right up your alley. So for the first 2000 movie, I like to just suggest Not Another Teen Movie. I love you guys. Y'all do a wonderful job. Oh, and Ash, I can relate to you now because I got a stepdad from Lufkin, Texas. So there you go. Big D, don't back off on your Red Dawn.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Love America.
That movie is outsiders with machine guns, and everybody loves the outsiders. Anyways, y'all have a great day and keep on chatting. Oh, and P.S. Ash, Blade Runner is a phenomenal movie.
Yes.
But boring as fuck.
Boo.
It took me 3 times to watch that movie
Thank you.
recently.
Thank you.
Anyways, keep chatting, crew.
Dude, you had me at Lufkin, and then you lost me at boring as fuck.
I'm surprised Paul was so kind in his voicemail after Big D shit all over Gainesville during Devil's Advocate.
It's because he knows. He knows. We got respect there, but I want to two quick updates here. Number one, thank you very much, Paul, for listening. We are hitting almost 2 big milestones coming up here soon. So because of listeners like Frank and Paul and all of our commissioners, we're about to hit 10 million downloads very shortly for all of our podcasts. And Shat the Movies is about to hit the big 4 million on its own.
Lest we forget, we're also coming up on our 300th episode.
Yes.
Or as Paul says, 360. Occasionally. But my last other update, Vanessa and I did a Virgin cruise last week. One of the last days, some heavy drinking led to an earlier night. We sat down and watched Notting Hill. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, God.
I liked it. I didn't like I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy, but Hugh Grant, he is charming.
He's charming. He is charming.
With his shirt unbuttoned and his bare little English chest.
Yes.
You get the sympathy, Brownie, Big D.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Paul, for your voicemail. If you want to leave us voicemail, you can go to shatpod.com and use the speak pipe feature to let us know what you're thinking. We have lots more voicemails coming up in the future weeks. Just ran out of time this week. And keep the email coming as well. We love reading everything you've written us.
So, Gene, next week, I think it's a milestone. I got to go back and check my numbers, but I believe this is podcast number 300 for Shat the Movies. And it is an appropriate film. We hit it just out of sheer luck, and you all should know what this is. After saving New York City from a ghost attack, a team of spirit exterminators are disbanded for demolishing part of the city during the battle. But when Peter Venkman learns that spirits have taken an interest in his son, the men launch a rogue ghost-chasing mission. The quest quickly goes awry, landing them in court. But when the ghosts turn on the judge, he issues an order allowing them to get back to work. Commissioned by Matthew P. This is a big one. This is iconic, and I'm prepared to be disappointed.
Well, thank you, Matthew, for the upcoming commission. Thank you, Omar, for commissioning Manhunter. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Seeking Arrangement, Instagram, and Equestrian Cupid at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find that information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all that information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. And we are everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
At the stroke of midnight, on New Year's Eve of the last decade of the 20th century, America's largest city is about to pay for the nastiness of its inhabitants. When that day comes, when the slime starts to rise.
The Titanic just arrived.
When ghosts start arriving by the boatload.
We gotta find the guys.
There's only one thing to do.
I'm out! Sometimes weird things happen. Someone has to deal with it. And who are you gonna call? All right, suck in the guts, guys. We're the Ghostbusters.
The superstars of the supernatural are back to nuke the spooks.
2 in the box! Ready to go. We be fast and they be slow.
Make some time.
Don't put any of those old cheap moves on me.
No.
It's different.
I have all new cheap moves.
Raise your spirits.
If we don't do something by midnight, you will be remembered in history as the man who let New York get sucked down into the 10th level of hell.
And kick some slime.
Looks like a giant Jell-O mold. I hate Jell-O. Oh, come on. There's always room for Jell-O. Happy New Year. Hose 'em.
Ghostbusters 2.
You're short.
Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis and Ernie Hudson in an Ivan Reitman film. Ghostbusters 2.
We're the best! We're the beautiful! We're the only Ghostbusters! We're back!